The first thing I remember is the ceiling. Those square white hospital tiles with the faint hum of fluorescent lights behind them buzzing just enough to make the world feel too sharp. The kind of light that shows everything, even the things you wish it wouldn't. My ribs throbbed every time I breathed a slow, pulsing reminder of the evening I would never be able to forget. Someone had tucked a blanket over me, but it felt more symbolic than comforting. When you grow up in a house like mine, a blanket never makes you feel safe. Through the glass doors of the trauma bay, I heard my father's voice erupt again, echoing down the ER hallway with a fury that made even seasoned nurses stiffen. "She needs to apologize to Maddie. Do you hear me? She is not leaving here until she apologizes." His voice hit the walls like a hammer. A security officer stepped into view, palms forward, speaking with a calmness that came from years of handling volatile people. "Sir, lower your voice. This is a hospital." My father jabbed a finger toward my room. She laid hands on her sister. "You should be talking to her. She is the problem." Behind him, perfect as always, stood Maddie. 15 years old, blonde curls arranged like she had stepped out of a school portrait, shoulders shaking, eyes wide with the exact amount of glistening fear needed to convince strangers she was the victim. She clutched her elbow as if I had twisted it. She was good at this. She had been practicing since she was 8. A sheriff deputy stepped into my room, his boots quiet against the slick floor. He did not look startled. He looked resigned, like he had already guessed where this was heading. "Evelyn, can I ask you something?" I nodded. The movement sent a sharp ache down my neck. "Do you feel safe going home tonight?" For years, I had kept the truth locked behind my teeth. For years, I had convinced myself it wasn't that bad. For years, I told myself it would get better if I tried harder, stayed quieter, caused less trouble. But lying in a hospital bed with bruises blooming across my collarbone, the truth finally beat the fear. I said no. His nod was slow and heavy, like he had expected nothing else. The curtain slid aside and Dr. Norman walked in. Silver hair, steady eyes. A man who had seen too many versions of this story and still tried to save the ones inside it. "Your father is extremely agitated. We cannot allow him back here, and given your injuries, we strongly advise you not to return home tonight." My throat tightened. I did not answer right away. I stared at the ceiling again because looking anywhere else meant acknowledging that everything was about to change. Dr. Norman stepped closer, voice soft but firm. "If you walk out of here and go back to that house, you will be back in this bed within weeks, maybe days. Maybe worse." The words hit harder than any shove my father had given me. My father was still yelling, still performing outrage for anyone watching. To him, this was simple. I had disrespected Maddie. In his world, disrespect was a crime and punishment was immediate. A nurse adjusted the monitor beside me. The beeps sounded too slow for how fast my thoughts were spinning. I closed my eyes. My breath trembled. And then, quietly, like saying it too loudly might break the thin thread holding me together, I whispered the same words I had said earlier that night when he demanded my apology. "All right." But this time, something in me shifted. Something final and cold and sharp. Inside my mind, the rest of the sentence took shape. They would regret everything far sooner than they thought. Those words did not come from anger. They came from clarity. The kind of clarity you only get when the world you have lived in collapses all at once, and you realize you survived it anyway. For the first time in my life, I felt a tiny crack of freedom open. A nurse asked if I needed water. I shook my head. I was remembering too much to speak. The shouting outside faded into a dull roar as my mind pulled me backwards past the bruises, past the chaos of tonight, past the moment everything broke. My story did not start in this hospital bed. It started years earlier, long before the ER lights, long before the security guards, long before I understood what escape really meant. The memory surged forward without my permission, pulling me back to 17, to the house where this all began, to the moment I first realized I had never truly been safe there. I grew up in a house where being invisible felt safer than being seen. People imagine neglect as silence, empty rooms, parents who forget birthdays. In my family, neglect came dressed as noise. It came from slammed doors and pointed fingers from a father who praised one child so loudly he drowned out the existence of the other, from a mother who found comfort in agreeing with him, from a sister who learned early that attention was power and she had all of it. My earliest memories of Maddie are of her pedaling a brand new electric bike down the driveway, shrieking with joy while my father filmed her on his phone, calling her his little star. I stood beside the mailbox holding the handlebars of a used bike with peeling stickers and a half-bent frame my uncle had found at a yard sale. When I asked Dad once why Maddie always got the new things he told me girls like her needed to feel special. I was 12, she was 10. Both of us were girls, but somehow only one of us qualified for special. As the years passed, the pattern never broke. Maddie received new clothes every school year while I altered my old uniforms and learned how to stitch buttons back on in the bathroom mirror. She had dance lessons, gymnastics, photography classes, and weekends spent at cheer camp. I was told to stay home and watch her so Mom could help Dad catch up on bills. My father used to say I had a responsible personality, and responsible girls did not need extras. They needed discipline, the kind of discipline that kept me quiet, compliant, out of the way. My mother was quieter than my father, but silence is its own kind of betrayal. She never questioned why Maddie's tantrums were labeled cute, while mine were labeled disrespect. She never objected when my father said Maddie had a gentle soul and I had a difficult one. She stood behind him in every argument, twisting the ring on her finger, nodding along while he laid out reasons why I was the problem and Maddie was the gift. He said it often enough that I started to believe it. At school, teachers noticed the imbalance before I did. Mrs. Dawson, my 7th grade science teacher, once asked if everything was all right at home after Maddie barged into her classroom during lunch, demanding I give her my sweatshirt. She stomped out wearing it, leaving me shivering beside the microscopes. I told Mrs. Dawson everything was fine. She looked unconvinced. Neighbors noticed, too. Once, when we adopted a shelter dog, my father made Maddie pose for pictures with it. He posted them with captions about how she had begged for the rescue and how proud he was of her compassion. I was the one who cleaned its crate at 6 in the morning, fed it, walked it, taught it to sit, and eventually held it while it was put down after being hit by a car. They replaced the dog with a new one for Maddie 3 months later and told me not to take it personally. I learned then that in our home, love was not something earned. It was something assigned, and it had never been assigned to me. The moment that cemented everything came when I was 13. I had walked into the kitchen late one evening to grab water before bed. My mother was on the phone with my grandmother, her voice low but clear in the quiet house. I stopped in the hallway when I heard my name. If it were not for Maddie, this family would have fallen apart. Evelyn is, well, she is difficult. I do not know what to do with her sometimes. She exhausts all of us. My grandmother murmured something I could not make out, but my mother sighed. I know she tries, but she always makes things harder. Maddie brings us together. Evelyn pulls us apart. I remember gripping the counter so hard my knuckles went white. I had spent years trying to make myself easy to love. I got good grades. I cleaned without being asked. I followed rules. I kept Maddie out of trouble. I did everything a responsible daughter was supposed to do. But in that moment, I understood something I had tried to ignore. In their eyes, I was the reason things were hard. I was the storm cloud hovering over their perfect golden child. I was not the daughter who brought joy. I was the daughter who caused strain simply by existing. I did not confront my mother. I did not cry. I just filled my glass and walked back to my room, moving as quietly as possible, because invisibility had become my survival strategy. By the time I turned 15, I could predict exactly how every argument would unfold. Maddie would mess up. I would get blamed. My father would shout. My mother would agree. Maddie would hide behind her hair, wide-eyed and trembling, pretending she was scared of me. She was never scared. She was confident. She knew she would be defended no matter how unbelievable her story was. She once told my father I slammed a door into her hand, even though I was at work at the pharmacy that afternoon. He grounded me for a week. When I showed him my time card, he said I must have misremembered. When I showed him my manager's written verification, he said I should stop trying to prove people wrong. His loyalty to Maddie was so absolute that facts became optional. I learned to stop fighting. Instead, I poured myself into school. I joined the health sciences program, obsessed with anatomy textbooks and CPR practice mannequins. Helping people made sense to me in a way my family never had. My counselor suggested I apply for medical assistant certifications after graduation. She told me I had a calmness that patients needed. She said she had never once seen me lose my temper. I smiled at that. I had plenty of temper. I had just learned not to waste it on people who would never listen. By 17, I had a plan. I was going to win a scholarship, get certified, and leave home as soon as I legally could. I kept my head down, stayed late at the pharmacy, and saved every dollar. I thought if I worked hard enough and stayed quiet enough, the house would stay peaceful until I escaped. I did not realize then that Matey hated being ignored more than she loved being adored, and she would very soon make sure my escape did not come easily. Being 17 in a house like mine meant living in a pressure cooker. Every day felt like walking barefoot over cracked glass, knowing one wrong step would draw blood. I kept telling myself I just needed to survive until graduation. 8 more months. 8 more months, and I could step out of their house and breathe without waiting for someone to accuse me of ruining something. At school, I buried myself in the health sciences track, spending extra hours in the lab, practicing wound care, vital checks, anything that made me feel capable. My instructor, Mrs. Ellery, often said I had the steady hands of someone meant for emergency work. She did not know the steadiness came from years of training my body not to flinch when my father raised his voice. I pushed myself toward a scholarship for a medical assistant program at UNC Charlotte. If I could get that scholarship, I could leave Salem behind forever. But at home, the harder I worked to build a future, the more Maddie chipped away at it. By 15, she had discovered social media and the dopamine rush of attention. She filmed everything: her new outfits, her new makeup, her new dance routines. Our father bought her a ring light and a phone tripod because she said it would help her succeed. When I asked if I could use it to record my scholarship interview practice, Dad said it was not fair to take Matey's things when she needed them for her goals. Goals. That word sounded like a joke the way he used it. Matey's goals shifted every week depending on which influencer she was obsessed with. This week she wanted to be a content creator. Last week she wanted to be a fashion blogger. Before that she wanted to be a singer even though she could not hold a pitch. Meanwhile, I was working 20 hours a week at the local pharmacy, stocking shelves, running registers, and helping elderly customers find the right medications. I came home late most evenings and left early most mornings. If I was not studying, I was working. If I was not working, I was preparing for the scholarship interview. The only adult in my life who seemed to notice was Mildred, my pharmacy manager. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed and plain-spoken, the kind of woman who could diagnose a customer's problem in 5 seconds and have a solution ready in 10. She started scheduling me for extra shifts, not because she needed help, but because she could tell I needed somewhere safe to be. She once caught me redoing a math worksheet on my break tears in the corners of my eyes after Maddie had spilled soda across my backpack that morning. She asked what happened. I told her it was nothing. She nodded in that knowing way older Southern women do when they decide not to press but file the truth away for later. Home only got harder. Matey took to wandering into my room without knocking. She used my makeup, my clothes, my brush, anything she wanted because she claimed she needed it more. If I locked my door, she screamed that I was hiding things from the family. If I kept it unlocked, she stormed in whenever she felt like it. I started storing my scholarship papers inside my pillowcase because that was the only place she never bothered to look. Dad always excused her behavior. She is a teenager. She is sensitive. She gets overwhelmed. You need to be patient with her. Meanwhile, I was also a teenager, but apparently I did not qualify for overwhelmed. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with anatomy flashcards spread in front of me, trying to memorize the function of every nerve in the arm for my exam. Maddie strutted in wearing a new crop top Dad had bought her after school. She grabbed my water bottle and took a long drink without asking, smearing lip gloss across the lid. "You look stressed," she said in that syrupy voice she used when she was about to ruin something. "Maybe it is because you never have fun." I ignored her, flipping the card over. Ulnar nerve, flexor muscles, sensation to the 4th and 5th fingers. She leaned closer, blocking my flashcards. "Dad says you are getting weird, always working, always studying, always acting like you are better than everyone." I exhaled, controlled and even. I am studying because I have goals. Real ones. She laughed sharp and mocking. The kind of laugh that makes your heart crawl into your stomach. Goals are pointless if nobody likes you. I kept my eyes on the cards, reaching for the next one. She snatched it out of my hand and held it above her head. How about you take a break and help me practice my dance routine? My scholarship interview is tomorrow. Put it back. She twirled the card between her fingers. You are so dramatic. It is just one card. Just one card became two, then three. Then she flicked them across the table like confetti. They scattered everywhere. My lungs tightened. I pushed my chair back, collected the cards, put them in the stack, and tried again. My pulse was hammering in my ears. She watched me with a smirk, satisfied that she had cracked me a little. Dad walked in right then. He took one look at the flashcards and said, "You should help your sister with her routine." I said, "She just threw my study materials across the room." He dismissed it with a wave. "She is young. Relax." I thought if I kept my head down, things would eventually settle. I thought if I said less, there would be less to fight about. But pressure does not evaporate when you ignore it. It builds. Every evening became a new test. Every morning became a countdown. By October, I had stopped studying in common areas and started staying late at the pharmacy to finish homework at the back counter. Mildred pretended not to notice, but she always walked by to slip me a muffin or tell me she was proud of me. My father, on the other hand, started accusing me of avoiding the family. "You act ashamed of us," he said one Friday night. "You disappear all the time. You think you are too good to be here." I said nothing. Arguing only made him angrier. He hated silence more than anything. And Maddie fed off his anger like it was oxygen. When I was 17, I thought pressure worked like gravity. I thought if enough weight pressed down on me, I would eventually go numb. I did not understand yet that pressure does not make you numb. It cracks you. And I was just one shove away from breaking. The night everything began to unravel started out painfully ordinary. It was a Tuesday in late October, one of those dim, chilly evenings where the air smelled like burning leaves and distant chimney smoke. I remember that clearly because I was sitting at my desk, hunched over my laptop, trying to finish the scholarship essay that would determine whether I escaped my family or stayed trapped under their roof for another year. The essay prompt was simple. Describe a moment that shaped who you are. I had written 3 drafts already and trashed them all. Writing the truth felt impossible. Writing lies felt dishonest. I wanted to tell them about the night I learned what invisibility felt like, or the way I memorized the pattern of my father's footsteps so I could disappear before he saw me. But scholarship committees do not want trauma. They want inspiration. So I was trying to craft something hopeful about resilience, forcing myself to phrase survival as growth. I was halfway through a paragraph when my door slammed open so hard it hit the wall. I did not jump because I was used to living on edge. Maddie burst in holding her phone, her ring light tucked under one arm, strands of hair falling from her curling iron waves. She sounded breathless, like the house itself needed to hurry for her. "I need your laptop. Now." I did not even look up. "You cannot have it. I am using it." She marched to my desk and planted herself between me and the keyboard. "This is serious. I have a live stream in 20 minutes and my phone storage is full. I need to use your laptop to transfer videos." Her voice had that sharpened tone that meant she was building toward a meltdown. I kept my eyes on the screen. "I have a scholarship essay due tomorrow morning. You cannot have it." She scoffed as if that were the most ridiculous excuse she had ever heard. "You can do it later. This will take 10 minutes. Every time you say 10 minutes, you take an hour, and the last time you used my laptop, you downloaded some shady editing app that crashed it." She rolled her eyes. "That was not my fault. The website said it was safe. It was literally called freeglittertransitions.ru. Nothing about that screams safe. Just let me use it." I shook my head. "No, I am risking too much if this essay is not perfect." She stared at me like I had spoken in a language she did not understand. Her world had only 2 settings. She gets what she wants, or someone is attacking her. She chose the second interpretation instantly. "You are so selfish. You never help me. Ever. You always act like I am ruining your life." I kept typing. I did not have time for her theatrics. She hated being ignored. The silence made her unravel. She snatched the corner of my laptop screen. "If you do not give this to me, I will scream. You know Dad will believe me." My pulse spiked, but I kept my voice steady. "Do not touch it." She yanked the laptop before I could grab it. The cord snapped out of the wall, the screen wobbled, and the whole thing clattered to the floor with a sickening crack. Time froze. The sound echoed through my chest. I stared at the laptop on the carpet, the frame bent at the corner, a thin hairline fracture crawling across the edge of the screen. I felt something inside me drop. Maddie's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Not with guilt, with calculation. Then she inhaled sharply and burst into tears. "Oh my God, you pushed me! Why would you do that?" She collapsed dramatically near the fallen laptop, wailing loud enough to rattle the hallway pictures. I had not even moved from my chair. Before I could say a word, she scrambled to her feet and bolted out of the room, screaming for Dad. "Dad! Dad!" Evelyn shoved me. She pushed me so hard. I heard her feet pounding down the stairs, every stomp deliberate, every sob theatrical. Panic crawled through my rib cage. Not fear of punishment, fear that I had just lost the one lifeline I had been working toward for months. I grabbed the laptop gently, hoping it was not as bad as it looked. The screen did not turn on. A faint crack spread from the corner like a spider web. My throat tightened. This essay was due tomorrow. There was no way to replace the laptop tonight. No way to salvage everything I had prepared. No way to finish. I heard my father's footsteps barreling up the stairs, heavy and fast, the way they always were when Maddie cried. She had weaponized his protectiveness for years, and he let her. He came storming into my room without knocking. Maddie was behind him, face blotchy, rubbing her arm like she had been hit. Dad's chest was rising and falling like he had sprinted the entire hallway. "What did you do to your sister?" There was no question in his voice. He had already decided the answer. I held up the laptop. She grabbed this and dropped it. "That is all that happened." His eyes narrowed. "She said you shoved her. That is a lie. I was in my chair the whole time." Maddie sniffled behind him, tilting her head just enough so the hallway light caught the imaginary bruise she was pretending she had. She whispered, "She scared me, Daddy." I felt something inside me crack the same way the laptop screen had cracked on the floor. It was tiny, but it was real, and it was the beginning of everything that came next. My father took a single step closer, the air around him tightening like a storm cloud gathering weight. "You are going to pay for this, Evelyn. You hear me? You will not get away with hurting your sister." I looked at him, at Maddie, at the broken laptop, at the door I had no escape through. And for the first time in my life, I realized the pressure that had been building for years was about to explode. My father did not walk toward me. He charged. The shift in his body was so fast that even the air in the room seemed to recoil. 1 second he was standing in the doorway, jaw tight, chest heaving, and the next he was towering over me with a fury that made my skin prickle. When he was angry like this, the whole house shrank. Walls that once felt thin suddenly felt too close. The room tightened around me, choking out any space where logic or truth could fit. He grabbed my upper arm before I could step back. His fingers dug into the muscle with a force that felt both practiced and impulsive, like he had been holding this reaction back for years. Pain shot across my shoulder. I gasped despite fighting not to show it. "You think you can put your hands on your sister and then lie about it?" His voice was low, the kind of low that was worse than shouting. I did not touch her. She dropped the laptop. "That is all." He jerked me sideways, pulling me off balance. My hips slammed against the edge of my desk. The flashcards I had neatly stacked earlier scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. He shoved the laptop toward me with his foot the dented frame, scraping loudly against the hardwood. "Look at what you did. You always do this. Always. You destroy things. And then you blame her." I stared at the broken screen through a blur of pain and disbelief. "She did that," I said through clenched teeth. "You are lying to protect yourself." My father's face reddened, the anger climbing up his neck like heat rising through a pipe. He raised his hand like he wanted to strike something, but instead slammed his palm against the wall beside my head. A picture frame fell, glass shattering across the floor. Maddie gasped on cue. It was always like watching a play she had memorized. Her wide eyes, her trembling lip, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daddy, don't hurt her." It was always the line that ended me. She said it not to protect me, but to make herself look merciful. Dad turned to her as if she were an angel, not the one who had caused this. He softened for a moment, brushing her hair back gently. "I would never hurt you, baby." He turned back to me, expression hardening again. "But her. She needs to learn respect." Maddie sniffled. "She shoved me first. I never touched her." Dad stepped closer, his shadow swallowing mine. "You need to stop lying." "Do you hear me? Stop it!" I raised my voice for the first time in months. "I am not lying. She is." Dad's eyes snapped. That was the moment the fuse blew. He grabbed both my shoulders and shoved me backward. I crashed into the wooden bookshelf beside my desk, the corner digging into my ribs with a sharp crack that sucked the air out of my lungs. Books toppled on top of me, and the shelf rattled so hard I thought it might fall. I slid to my knees, arms wrapped instinctively around my middle as a surge of pain burst across my side. My vision wavered. Maddie let out a scream. It sounded genuine, maybe because even she had not expected him to shove me that hard. My mother rushed up the stairs, breathless and already crying. She froze at the doorway, taking in the scene. Me on the ground, the broken laptop, the shattered picture frame. My father standing over me with his chest rising and falling like he had just run a marathon fueled by rage. Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. "Thomas, stop." He ignored her completely, pointing at me with a shaking hand. "Get up. You are going to apologize to your sister." My ribs burned every time I inhaled. Each breath felt like a knife dragging beneath my skin. I pushed myself upright, gripping the edge of the desk to keep from collapsing. I managed to whisper, "I am not apologizing for something I did not do." His face contorted into something feral. "Yes, you will. You think you can disrespect this family. You think you can treat your sister like this. She is the good one, not you." My mother reached for him. "Thomas, please. She is hurt." He shook her off without looking at her. "If she is hurt, she brought it on herself. This family used to be peaceful until she started acting like some rebellious brat." I stared at him, stunned by how easily he rewrote reality. Peaceful. That was the word he used for years of walking on eggshells, years of blame, years of letting Maddie dictate who was right and who was wrong. He pointed toward the hallway. "Suspended. You hear me? Suspended from this house until you apologize. No phone, no computer, no leaving except for school. You stay in your room and think about what you did." My mother's tears spilled over. "Please, she is in pain. She needs help." He snapped at her. "She needs discipline. That is what she needs." My entire body shook. Not from fear. From something colder. Something that felt like detachment. Something that felt like truth finally settling in. I stood straighter despite the pain screaming down my ribs. I said no. His eyes widened, then narrowed as if the word itself was an attack. "What did you say?" I said no. I am not apologizing. Not for her lies. Not for your version of a story that never happened. Maddie's face flickered, her acting slipping for a moment, her expression revealing something almost like surprise. Or maybe fear that her script was falling apart. My father stepped closer, face inches from mine. "Then, you are suspended until you come to your senses. Your behavior is on you." I looked at him, at the man who was supposed to be my father but had always been Maddie's soldier instead. I looked at my mother crying but not stepping between us. I looked at Maddie pretending to tremble while watching me with smug satisfaction beneath it all. And then, something inside me clicked into place, silent and sharp as a blade sliding home. "All right." I said it calmly, evenly, the same tone I would later use in the ER when everything finally broke. He expected a fight. He expected tears. He expected me to chase his approval the way I always had. Instead, I gave him cold agreement, the kind that meant something far different than what he thought. It was the moment I decided I was done, completely done, and the moment that would send every one of them toward a future they never saw coming. The night blurred after that, as if my memory wrapped the worst parts in cotton just to keep me from breaking when I looked back. I remember clutching my ribs, each breath a small explosion of pain, while Mom fumbled with her car keys, whispering apologies she never said out loud in daylight. She kept glancing toward the house as if Dad might charge out and drag me back inside. He did not. He stayed in the doorway with his arms crossed, jaw tight, staring at me the way someone looks at a disobedient dog. A warning, a promise, a threat. The drive to the hospital was almost silent except for my mother's shaky breaths and the clicking of the turn signal as though it were counting down to something neither of us was brave enough to name. She whispered once, "Please do not tell them it was your father." I did not answer, not because I agreed, because talking hurt. When we walked into the ER, the fluorescent lights hit me like a punch to the skull. A triage nurse looked up, took one glance at the way I held my ribs, and immediately stood. What happened? Mom answered fast, too fast. She tripped over a bookshelf. The nurse paused, the kind of pause that said she had heard 1,000 versions of the same lie. She nodded anyway, guiding me into a wheelchair, jotting notes on a clipboard. A pressure band formed around my chest, squeezing every breath thinner than the last. In the exam room, she lifted my shirt slightly to check the bruising, and I saw her expression shift from routine to concern. "These marks are not from a fall." Before I could reply, before Mom could spin another story, a knock sounded at the door. A sheriff deputy stepped in, calm, neutral, but observant. "Evening, folks. Standard protocol. We received a call from the hospital staff." He looked at me. Not Mom. "Can you tell me what happened?" Mom's hand tightened around her purse. I swallowed, feeling the dryness sandpapering down my throat. I wanted to lie. Not for my father, for myself. Because telling the truth meant something would change, and change was terrifying. But the truth had been clawing its way up my throat for years. My father pushed me. The words came out flat, stripped of drama and excuses. He shoved me into a bookshelf. Mom gasped. "Sweetheart, that is not exactly—" The deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, let her speak." For a long beat, the only sound was the monitor beeping its steady rhythm in the corner. The deputy nodded once. "Thank you for telling me." Then he stepped outside, leaving the door cracked. I heard him speaking to someone, probably reporting it to security or asking them to keep Dad away from the back rooms. The curtain slid open again, and Dr. Norman walked in. His eyes were the first thing I noticed. They did not ask questions. They saw answers. He examined my ribs, checking for fractures, asking me to breathe in and out slowly while he listened with his stethoscope. His tone was gentle but professional, the kind reserved for patients who have seen too much for their age. He glanced at the bruising, spreading under my skin like spilled ink. This was not an accident. I did not confirm or deny it. He did not pressure me to. Instead, he said something I will never forget. "If you do not leave that house, you will be back here again. Maybe soon, maybe with worse injuries. Sometimes the truth is not shocking. Sometimes it is simply heavy." His words felt like a weight placed into my hands, forcing me to decide whether I would drop it or carry it forward. Mom looked at me, eyes red silently, pleading with me not to ruin her version of our family. I looked away. A few minutes later, security stopped my father when he tried to enter the restricted hallway. His voice boomed through the corridor. "She needs to apologize to her sister. You people are ridiculous. Why am I not allowed back there?" My heart hammered as the deputy approached, opened the door, and crouched beside my bed. "Evelyn, we can file a report and connect you with services right now if you want. You do not have to go home." My ribs throbbed. My head spun. Everything in me wanted to curl up and disappear, but something cold and clear from earlier was still sitting in my chest, whispering louder than my fear. "No, I do not want to file anything yet." His brow lifted, but he nodded. "All right, but that does not mean you need to return home tonight. Your father is agitated to a level that concerns us. For your safety, we recommend finding somewhere else to stay for the night." Mom finally spoke. "She can come home. Thomas is just upset." The deputy stared at her, unmoving. "Ma'am, your husband is not just upset. He is being combative with staff and demanding access to your daughter. Evelyn needs a safe environment." Mom looked at me like I was supposed to help her fix this, protect the illusion she lived in. I said nothing. for the first time I did not feel guilty for choosing myself. Dr. Norman stepped closer, voice low but firm. I want you to listen to me. You are in danger. Do not go back there until you have a plan. That sentence was the turning point, the moment the decision stopped being terrifying and became inevitable. A nurse returned with discharge papers and an ice pack wrapped in a towel. She handed me a card with a hotline number and addresses for local shelters, then slipped something else into my hand without my mother noticing. A small, hand-written note. You deserve safety. I stared at it for a long moment before slipping it into my pocket. The deputy escorted Mom and me toward the waiting area, keeping Dad far behind a security barricade. His voice still echoed ranting about disrespect and discipline, still trying to bend the world to his will. But for the first time, his voice felt far away, like it belonged to someone I used to know. Mom whispered as she walked beside me. Do not make this worse. Please. I did not look at her. I did not promise anything. I simply whispered the same 2 words I had said earlier that night. All right. But inside my mind, the sentence finished itself again, steady as steel. They would regret everything far sooner than they thought. Dawn in Salem had always been a soft thing, a pale wash of blue over quiet streets and damp lawns. But that morning the sky looked sharper, like the world itself was holding its breath. Mom drove home without saying a word, fingers clenched around the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had no color left. I sat rigid in the passenger seat, every bump in the road sending a jolt through my bruised ribs. She kept glancing at me as if she wanted to say something, maybe apologize, maybe ask me to rewrite the night into something easier for her to live with, but she said nothing. Silence was safer for her. When we pulled into the driveway, Dad's truck was still parked crookedly, like he had slammed it into place during one of his tantrum storms. The porch light was still on. It flickered in the morning breeze, a small, pathetic beacon in a house that never offered real warmth. Mom reached out to touch my wrist before I opened the door. Just be quiet. Let him cool down. I slipped my arm away gently. Quiet had been my entire life. Quiet had never saved me. Inside, the house felt heavy stale from last night's shouting. Dad was not in the living room. His boots were by the door, his jacket thrown across the couch. Maddie's bedroom door was cracked open. I saw her sitting on her bed legs pulled to her chest, scrolling through her phone without looking the slightest bit distressed. She barely glanced up at me. Her voice was soft but edged. Are you finally ready to apologize? I felt something cold wash through me. Not hatred, not fear, just realization. She would never stop. She would never change. This house would never stop choosing her. I walked past her without a word. In my room, the damage from last night hit me harder than the physical pain. The broken laptop on the floor, my books scattered, the shattered picture frame. It looked like a storm had ripped through only my space, leaving everything else intact. I stood in the doorway, breathing slowly, letting the ache in my ribs settle into a rhythm. Then something in me clicked. A decision. A beginning. I grabbed my duffel bag from under the bed and began packing. Quietly. Methodically. Clothes. Toothbrush. A photo of my grandmother I had hidden in a textbook. My CNA application papers. The little note the nurse had slipped me, the one that said you deserve safety. My hands shook, but my resolve did not. Every item I placed inside the bag felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had always been told did not matter. I moved fast, but the house was still asleep enough that no one noticed. When I zipped the bag, the sound felt like a line being drawn. Final. Irreversible. I stepped into the hallway. Maddie was watching me now, suspicion flickering across her face. Where are you going? Her voice was small but sharp. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder. Out! She stood up, folding her arms. You cannot leave. Dad said you are suspended. The absurdity almost made me laugh. Suspended. As if this were school. As if he were the principal and not the reason I needed a hospital bed last night. I walked past her. She reached out and grabbed my wrist. You will come back. You always do. You think you won't, but you will. Behind her words, I heard an echo. A threat. A warning. A prophecy she believed she controlled. I pulled my wrist free. Not this time. Her expression faltered. For the first time, she looked unsure. I walked down the stairs. Each step felt like peeling away another layer of fear. When I reached the bottom, Mom was in the kitchen making coffee, her back turned. She glanced at my bag and went still. "Evelyn, please, do not do this. Dad will calm down. He always does." Her voice trembled. She sounded exhausted, older than her age. I stood in the doorway watching the steam rise from her mug. "Mom!" He shoved me into a bookshelf. "He hurt me." She pressed her lips together until they turned white. "He did not mean to. You know how he is. He loves you." I closed my eyes. It was the script she had said so many times it was more reflex than belief. I whispered mostly to myself I deserve better. She wiped her eyes with the side of her hand, turning away like the sight of me hurt her. "Please, Evelyn, do not tell anyone. It will ruin us." I hesitated, but the silence that had protected this house for years was no longer mine to carry. I walked to the door. When I opened it, the cold morning air hit my skin like a baptism. It felt like the world whispering go. Dad's voice thundered from upstairs, suddenly probably realizing I was awake. "Evelyn, get in here right now." The sound trailed me as I stepped off the porch, but it no longer controlled me. The sky was just beginning to lighten as I reached the end of the driveway. My heartbeat steadied. I felt bruised. I felt weak. I felt terrified. But beneath all of that, I felt free. Mildred's house was 2 streets away, a small blue bungalow with flower pots even in February. She was standing at the door when I approached as if she had known I was coming. She looked at my bag, at my bruised face, at the stiffness in my movements. Her expression softened into something maternal, something steady. "Honey, come inside. You are safe now." The words cracked something in me, something old and wounded and silent. I walked in, set my bag down, and for the first time in my 17 years, I let my shoulders relax. Dawn broke fully over the neighborhood, then warm light spilling across Mildred's wooden floors. I had escaped, and nothing in my life would ever be the same again. Mildred's house smelled like cinnamon oatmeal and lavender detergent, a scent so opposite of my own home that it almost made me dizzy. I stood just inside the doorway, stiff and unsure, my duffel bag hanging from my shoulder like a confession. Mildred closed the door quietly behind me, the soft click sealing me into a world that for the first time did not feel hostile. "Sit, sweetheart," she said gently, motioning toward her small kitchen table. It was covered in crocheted placemats and a half-finished jigsaw puzzle of a lighthouse. I sat slowly, holding my ribs without drawing attention to the movement. Mildred busied herself at the counter, pouring hot water into a mug and stirring in honey. Her motions were practiced calm, the kind of calm that made you want to breathe deeper. She set the mug in front of me. "Drink this. It helps with shock." I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, even though my fingers trembled. The first sip soothed my throat, although nothing could fully quiet the swirling mix of exhaustion and fear inside my chest. Mildred pulled out the chair across from me and sat down with deliberate slowness, giving me space to speak first. I did not. Silence felt strange, not tense or heavy like at home, but open. Like I had permission to take a breath before the next chapter started. Finally, she folded her hands on the table. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" The question was gentle but steady. Not a demand, not an accusation, an invitation. I swallowed hard. My voice came out hoarse. He shoved me into a bookshelf. Harder than he meant to, or exactly as hard as he meant to. "I do not know anymore." Mildred's jaw tightened slightly. "You went to the hospital." I nodded. They wanted me to stay somewhere safe for the night. Her eyes softened, but not with pity. With understanding. Real understanding. "I told you months ago," she said quietly, "that one day you would need to choose yourself." I looked down at the mug, watching steam curl upward like a question I had not yet answered. I do not know where to start. Mildred reached across the table and squeezed my hand, carefully avoiding my bruises. "You start here. I have a room for you. You stay as long as you need. You do not owe me anything except honesty." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away quickly. Crying still felt like a luxury I had to earn. After breakfast, Mildred gave me a tour of the house. The spare bedroom was small, with pale yellow walls and a quilt that looked handmade. The closet held a few empty hangers. The window overlooked her garden, a patchwork of winter soil and stubborn green sprouts. When I set my bag down on the bed, my shoulders loosened for the first time in months. Mildred leaned against the doorframe. "I have to go to work soon, but I already called someone who wants to meet you." I turned confused. "Who?" "Dr. Norman." My breath caught. "The ER doctor." She nodded. "I have known him for 20 years. He is a good man. He wants to talk with you if you are up for it." "Why?" "Because he thinks you have potential." "Potential for what?" Mildred smiled. "A future that looks nothing like the one you were stuck in." She left for her shift at the pharmacy around 10, giving me the house key and a note with Wi-Fi information written in her neat cursive. I sat on the edge of the bed afterwards, staring at the walls, listening to a silence that did not feel threatening. At noon, there was a knock on the front door. When I opened it, Dr. Norman stood there holding a small brown paper bag and wearing the same steady expression he had at the hospital. "Afternoon, Evelyn. I brought lunch." I stepped aside for him. "Thank you. You did not have to." "You are right," he said calmly, setting the bag on the table. "I did not have to. I wanted to." We sat down, and he unpacked sandwiches, chips, and bottled water. Nothing fancy, but it felt like more care than I had been shown at home in years. He ate quietly for a moment, giving me space, then looked at me with an expression I could only describe as deliberate kindness. "You are 17. You have a long life ahead of you. What happened last night does not have to define it." I nodded, unsure what to say. "Mildred mentioned you want to go into healthcare." I swallowed. "I did, but my laptop is broken. I cannot finish my scholarship essay." He held up a hand. "One obstacle does not end a path." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded pamphlet titled Local Emergency Clinic Youth Internship Program. He slid it across the table. "We run a small community emergency clinic on the south side. Short-staffed, underfunded, but we do good work. I am willing to offer you a volunteer spot. You would not be doing anything medical yet, just basic support tasks, but you would learn. And you would be safe there." My throat tightened painfully. "Why me?" "Because you remind me of people who make it out." I stared at the pamphlet. The paper felt strangely heavy. My mind scrambled for objections. "I do not have transportation." "Mildred does. She already offered to drive you until you get settled." I exhaled shakily. "What about my father?" "The police made a note of the incident. If he comes near this house making threats, you call the sheriff's office immediately. You are not alone." Those words hit harder than any diagnosis. You are not alone. They echoed through a part of me that had been hollow for years. I nodded slowly. "I want to try." He smiled, small but real. "Good. You start tomorrow afternoon." When he left, I sat at the table long after the door shut, staring at the pamphlet. The future had always felt like a distant mirage, something other people built while I stayed trapped in the shadow of someone else's needs. But now it felt like a door had cracked open. Not wide, just enough for light to slip through. That evening, Mildred returned from work and found me sitting on the couch, the pamphlet still in my hands. She did not ask if I had accepted. She simply smiled and said I knew you would, and for the first time, I believed her. The next morning felt different from every morning I had lived through before. Not lighter exactly, because the ache in my ribs still pulsed with every breath, and the memory of my father's roar still clung to me like smoke, but clearer. Like for once, my life was no longer something happening to me. I woke in Mildred's spare bedroom to the sound of birds pecking at her feeder outside the window. Soft light spilled through the curtains. The quilt on my legs was warm and heavy, and for the first time in years, I had slept without jolting awake to footsteps or slammed doors or the sharp snap of someone calling my name like an accusation. Mildred had already left for her early shift by the time I stepped into the kitchen. She had put out breakfast for me the way moms did in shows I used to watch, never expecting it to happen in my own life. A bowl of oatmeal, a banana, and a note written in her neat cursive. Day 1. Sweetheart, be brave, the good kind of brave. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my pocket before eating. My body still protested every movement, but the quiet was a balm I did not know I needed. At noon, Mildred came home, changed into a clean set of scrubs, and drove me to the community emergency clinic. It was small, tucked between a laundromat and a thrift store, the kind of building most people drove past without noticing. But to me, it looked like the doorway to something new. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and cold metal, but it also smelled like purpose. People moved quickly, but not frantically. There were beeps and murmurs, but none of the chaos of the hospital ER. A nurse named Tasha introduced herself while tying her hair into a bun. "You must be Evelyn. Heard a lot about you." "Good things," she added when she saw my startled expression. She handed me a clipboard with tasks: stocking gloves and masks, wiping down surfaces, restocking gauze drawers. Simple things, small things. But when you grow up as the problem in your family, even small things that matter feel monumental. For the first hour, I moved slowly, focusing on the rhythm of the work. The soft click of drawers, the rustle of latex boxes, the hum of the mini refrigerator that held saline and ice packs. Each task anchored me. Each item I sorted made me feel more like a person than a burden. Tasha checked on me every few minutes, not hovering, but noticing. "You doing okay, kid?" I nodded. "Yes, thank you." She smiled. "You work like someone who wants to be here." That is rare. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the heating vents. Later, Dr. Norman walked past with a chart in one hand and paused long enough to give me a nod. "Good work so far. Keep steady." I moved through the rest of my shift with a strange calmness. When the clinic got busier, I ran errands between exam rooms, handing nurses supplies, grabbing blankets, delivering charts. No one yelled. No one accused. No one compared me to someone better. No one treated me like an inconvenience. They simply trusted me to help. And I did. I wanted to. At the end of the shift, Tasha handed me a paper cup of water and leaned against the counter. "You know, most people who start here do not show this much effort until month 2. You sure you do not have some secret EMT training?" I laughed softly. The sound surprised me. Laughter had not lived in my house for years unless it was at my expense. I said quietly, "I am just trying not to mess up." "Honey, you are not messing up. You are doing great." When Mildred picked me up, she studied my face for a moment like she was searching for something. Then she smiled. "You look taller." I frowned. "I am definitely not." She shook her head. "No, I mean your spirit. You are standing straighter." I looked at my reflection in her car window. For the first time, she was right. By the second week, the clinic felt like a world with rules that made sense. Work hard, be honest, help people. No manipulation, no favoritism, no walking on eggshells. I found myself staying later just to help Tasha finish restocking or to walk the last patient to the lobby. Every night when I returned to Mildred's house, she had dinner waiting or leftovers labeled with my name. My ribs began to heal, though the bruises turned from deep violet to sickly green before fading. But the deeper bruises, the emotional ones, took longer. Sometimes I woke up expecting to hear Dad pounding on the door. Sometimes my chest tightened when the phone rang, terrified it was my mother, begging me to come home and pretend nothing had happened. But neither of them called. Not once. Sometimes I thought that hurt more than anything. School became strangely easier, too. Without the constant turmoil of home, I could focus. I caught up on assignments. Teachers noticed I looked more alive. One of them pulled me aside after class, saying, "Whatever changed, keep going in that direction. You are turning into yourself." At the end of the month, the clinic offered me a small stipend for my hours. It was not much, but it was enough. Enough to pay for my own toiletries. Enough to help Mildred with groceries, even though she pretended she did not need it. Enough to feel like I was contributing to a home that wanted me. That mattered more than anything money could buy. By the third month, Dr. Norman pulled me aside. He handed me a form. "Ever heard of a CNA program?" My heart skipped. Yes, I always wanted to. "But I cannot afford the classes." He tapped the paper. "The clinic has a community scholarship. Not many apply." "You should." My hands shook. "Why me?" "Because you show promise. And a person with promise deserves a chance." I filled out the application that night at Mildred's kitchen table while she watched her favorite old sitcom reruns. When I turned the form in the next morning, Tasha hugged me. A real hug. Warm. Safe. I did not know how much I missed that. And 2 weeks later, when I opened my email and saw the single line that changed everything, "Congratulations, you have been accepted into the CNA training program," I sat down on the floor and cried. Not the quiet, desperate crying from my childhood. This was different. This was release. This was becoming. And even though I had no idea what waited in the months ahead, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. For the first time in my life, I was building something real, something mine. The first sign that the Hart household was beginning to crumble came in a whispered conversation I overheard in the break room at the clinic. I was wiping down the microwave when Tasha said to another nurse, "Isn't that the fireman from Salem, the one who hurt his shoulder on a call?" I froze. Those words hit with the force of a memory I had tried to bury. My father. My chest tightened as they talked. "Yeah," someone said. "He got pulled off duty. Could be months before he is cleared, maybe never." Tasha sighed. "Poor family." I swallowed hard. Poor family. The phrase stung. People always said things like that about my father. Brave, dedicated, a provider. They did not know the tremor I still felt in my ribs when I thought of him. After my shift, Mildred drove me home humming softly to the oldies station. When she turned onto our street, I spotted Mrs. Lang, our former neighbor, watering her front yard. Her eyes brightened when she saw me. "Evelyn, honey, I have been hoping to run into you." She set the hose down and walked toward the car. Mildred rolled down the window so I did not have to get out. Mrs. Lang leaned in, her voice low. "Things have gotten rough over there. I knew she meant my house." My stomach tightened. "What happened?" She exhaled heavily. "Your daddy hurt his shoulder last month. Bad. They took him off shifts. Money has been tight. He is home all the time now, pacing that place like a caged bull. And your sister..." She hesitated. "That girl has been suspended from school. Twice. Fighting. Mouthy. Causing scenes." My breath caught. "Matey. Suspended." Mrs. Lang shook her head. "And your mama looks worn to the bone. She is working mornings at the bakery and evenings cleaning offices. They are struggling something awful." I did not know what to say. A part of me felt a faint ache for the familiarity of it all. But another part, the part that had almost died under their roof, felt nothing. My voice came out neutral. "Thank you for telling me." Mrs. Lang touched my hand gently. "That house hasn't been right since you left, sweetheart. I didn't know how to answer that either." Back at Mildred's home, I sat on the couch processing everything. The irony was sharp. In my father's mind, my departure had been disrespect betrayal, the act of a daughter who refused to fall in line. But in reality, my leaving had exposed the cracks they spent years pretending did not exist. I excused myself to my room and lay back on the quilt, staring at the ceiling. My ribs no longer hurt when I breathed, not physically anyway, but tonight a familiar heaviness pressed against my lungs. Memories flickered like unwelcome guests. Dad yelling, Maddie crying on cue, Mom wringing her hands. But the echoes felt distant now, like they belonged to a past self. A self I had outgrown. The next day, while stocking gauze in the clinic supply closet, my phone buzzed. A number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it, but something in my chest pushed me to answer. "Hello." Silence crackled. Then a hesitant voice. "Evelyn." It was Mrs. Green, my old English teacher. My heart tightened. "Hi." She exhaled as if relieved I picked up. "I heard what happened at your house. Are you safe?" "Yes, I am fine." She paused. "Your sister has been having issues." I held the phone tighter. "What kind of issues?" "Behavioral, academic, emotional. She has been lashing out at students. I think she is hurting." I closed my eyes. Hurting. That word rolled through me like ice water. For years, every bruise I hid, every tear I swallowed, every night I prayed to disappear, had been brushed aside with that one phrase. "Maddie is hurting. And because she is hurting, you must bend," I said quietly. "She has people who can help her, people who always helped her." Mrs. Green sighed sadly. "I just wanted to check on you." Thank you, I said softly. After we hung up, I leaned against the shelf, breathing slowly. The past was not reaching for me. It was collapsing around them. Later that week, when Mildred and I stopped by the thrift store for kitchen towels, I ran into another neighbor from my old street. She seemed startled to see me. "You look good. Healthier." Then she leaned closer. "Things aren't good at your house. Your daddy's temper? Well, without work keeping him busy, he is restless, shouting all the time. Your mama told me she can barely keep up with bills. Mortgage is months behind." My chest tightened. Mortgage. Months. Behind. The words thudded through me, not with triumph, but with something quieter. Recognition. The life they had built on control, image, and denial was finally cracking. That night, Mildred made chicken soup and I helped chop carrots. Her voice was steady when she finally said, "You cannot save them, Evelyn. They made their choices." I nodded, though part of me still wrestled with the idea. She looked at me soft but firm. "That house is falling because of what was already inside it, not because you left." The next morning, while cleaning exam tables, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text, from a number I knew by heart. My mother. "We need you. Please come home." Then another text. "Things are falling apart. Your father is not taking it well. Please just talk to him." I stared at the screen. My ribs did not hurt anymore, but something deeper did. That old instinct tugged at me, the one that had been shaped through years of conditioning. Fix it. Make it easier for them. Carry the weight. Apologize even when you are right. But I was not that girl anymore. I set the phone down and went back to work. The clinic was busy, patients lining the hallway, nurses moving fast. Purpose hummed around me, reminding me of everything I had built, everything I had chosen. That evening, I showed Mildred the texts. She read them slowly, her expression unreadable. Then she placed the phone down and said something that would follow me for years. People who cause the pain often scream the loudest when the consequences arrive. I did not respond. I did not need to. I was beginning to understand that building a new life meant letting the old one crumble without trying to hold it up. And the Hart household, the one that had smothered me for 17 years, was collapsing. Not because I left, but because it was always destined to. The first real attempt from my family to pull me back did not come in the form of an apology or even a genuine acknowledgement of what they had done. It came as a desperate voicemail left on Mildred's landline, a phone that almost never rang except for clinic potlucks and church events. I had just returned from an evening shift and was unlacing my shoes when I heard Mildred call my name in that gentle but firm tone she used when something important was happening. I walked into the kitchen and saw her standing by the old wall-mounted phone, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of caution and concern. "It is your father," she said quietly. "He left a message." My stomach tightened, instinctive and unwelcome, the old fear sparking like a match struck too close to dry twigs. "Play it," I said, though part of me wished I had said no. Mildred pressed the button. My father's voice filled the room, rough and strained. "Evelyn, this is your dad?" he began, as if I needed an introduction. His breathing was uneven, like he had been pacing. "We need to talk. Things are not good here. Your sister is having a hard time. Your mother is overwhelmed. We need you home. Just come talk to us." The message ended abruptly, as if he had run out of words or air or both. For a long moment, neither Mildred nor I spoke. The air felt heavy, thick with old ghosts. Finally, she said, "You do not have to call back." "I know," I replied. But deep inside, a storm was forming, not of guilt exactly, but of something adjacent to it. An old reflex pulling at the edges of my newfound stability. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. Calls like that used to send me spiraling. Fix it. Make it right. Smooth the chaos so everyone else could breathe. But now the chaos was theirs alone. That realization felt strange, empowering, but unsettling. The next day, during my lunch break at the clinic, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from my mother. "Please come home." "We need your help," Maddie is out of control. Your father is stressed and I cannot hold everything together. My fingers hovered above the screen. For years, I had been trained to respond immediately to any crisis at home, even when the crisis was caused by their own choices. I locked the phone and shoved it into my pocket. 2 hours later, the phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from Maddie herself, something that made my chest go cold before I even opened it. The text was short. You need to come home. This is all your fault. My fault. Even now, even after everything that was their angle, their narrative. I leaned against the supply cart and closed my eyes, letting the exhaustion run its course. The next morning, Mildred found me sitting at the small kitchen table long before sunrise, staring at a cup of tea I had not touched. She sat across from me and waited. That was one of the things I loved about her. She knew silence had value. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded distant even to my own ears. Why do they think I owe them something? Mildred's eyes softened. Because for 17 years you did. You were the buffer, the fixer, the child who carried what did not belong to her. Now that you stopped, they are panicking. It was the first time anyone had ever said those words aloud. The truth hit me with the clarity of a bell ringing in a quiet church. They were not calling because they loved me. They were calling because they needed something from me. They were calling because their structure depended on someone absorbing the weight. Without me there, the pressure had nowhere to go but inward. That afternoon, while I was changing linens in exam room 3, my phone buzzed again. This time, my father's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for several seconds before finally answering. His voice came through sharp and urgent. Evelyn, you cannot ignore us forever. Come home. Your mother is falling apart. And your sister needs you. I took a steady breath. I am not coming home. His silence was instant and violent. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled with anger. This is your family. You do not abandon your family. The words struck something old and raw inside me, but I stayed steady. I did not abandon anyone. You suspended me from my home. You made it clear I was only welcome if I apologized for something I did not do. There was the sound of him pacing heavy footfalls, the clench of his jaw audible even through the phone. You need to apologize to your sister Evelyn. She is hurting. You leaving made everything worse. There it was, the predictable pivot. My breathing slowed, and for the first time I said what I had never dared to say. Her pain is not my responsibility. His silence froze the air. When he spoke again, it was a low growl. You are being selfish. The old me would have apologized immediately, would have folded, but I was not the old me. I am setting boundaries, I said quietly. That is not selfish. That is survival. His breathing grew louder, angrier. If you do not come home, things will get worse, and when they do not expect us to forgive you. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice level. The consequences arriving now are not mine. They belong to the people who created them. I hung up before he could reply. My hand shook as I lowered the phone, but it was not fear. It was adrenaline. Awakening. That evening, as we closed the clinic, Dr. Norman walked past me, paused, and said, "Trouble at home." I nodded. He studied my face for a moment. You cannot save people who refuse to change. It was the closest thing to permission I had ever received. That night, I slept deeper than I had in weeks, because I finally understood something essential. My family was not collapsing because I left. They were collapsing because they had built a house on neglect, favoritism, and denial. And without anyone left to absorb the damage, the walls were finally buckling. They were calling for help, not out of love, but out of fear. And I was done being their shield. The night Maddie came into the ER, I did not recognize her at first. I was midway through a shift pushing a vitals cart down the hallway, mind focused on a dehydrated teenager in room 6 and a diabetic patient waiting for labs. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the usual soundtrack of exhaustion and urgency. Then the ambulance bay doors flew open with a hiss, and 2 EMTs rushed in a stretcher. I caught only a blur at first. A small girl curled inward, tangled hair, bruised knees, an oxygen tube in place. Nothing unusual for a Friday night, until one of the EMTs called out female 15, multiple contusions, probable concussion, possible fractured wrist boyfriend assault found near the old railroad bridge. My body reacted before my brain did. My pulse spiked, my breath hitched. It felt like the world around me suddenly tilted, like gravity shifted in a direction only I could feel. I walked closer slowly, like someone approaching the edge of a cliff. The EMT pulled back a strand of hair from the girl's face, and the world dropped out from under me. It was Maddie, my sister, my golden child sister, the one the world had always protected, the one my father had shielded at all costs, the one for whom I had been sacrificed over and over again. I stood frozen, my fingers gripping the vitals cart so tightly my knuckles went white. For a second I thought I might faint, not from shock, but from the brutal collision of past and present smashing together so violently it made my vision blur. The EMT glanced at me. "You good?" I swallowed. "Yes, I am fine." But I was not. I was anything but fine. The charge nurse, Deb, spotted me. She gave me a quick once-over, then looked back at the stretcher. "You take her vitals, Ev." I blinked at her. She had no idea who the girl was. None of them did. To them, she was just another patient. But to me, she was every bruise I had ever hidden, every lie I had ever listened to, every night I had cried into my pillow while she played the victim. I moved to the stretcher, my hands steady even though my heart hammered like a fist against my ribs. Maddie's eyes fluttered open for a second, hazy and unfocused. When she saw me, confusion twisted her face. Then fear. Then something else. Something like shame. "Evelyn," she whispered, barely audible. The sound of my name on her lips nearly cracked me open. I checked her blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation. I did what I was trained to do. My hands were professional, precise, detached. But my chest felt like it was splitting. Deb leaned over the chart. "Assault by boyfriend. Parents called. They are on their way." My stomach clenched hard. No, not here. Not now. Not when I finally felt free. But the universe did not care. 10 minutes later, as I was pushing the stretcher toward radiology, I heard the door slam again. Heavy boots. A frantic voice. And then the unmistakable sound of my father yelling at hospital security. "Let me through. That is my daughter." Security blocked him. "Sir, you need to calm down." Thomas Hart shoved forward. "My wife is already inside. Move." I turned my face away instinctively. Old habits. Old fears. My father's voice boomed through the corridor, the same voice that had once sent me into panic spirals for years, the one that had followed me into the ER the night he shoved me into a dresser. The echo of that night still lived somewhere inside my bones. The automatic doors to radiology opened behind me, and I pushed Maddie's stretcher inside just as my mother rounded the corner. She stopped dead when she saw me. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened, glistening with something like disbelief. Or guilt. Or both. "Evelyn!" Her voice cracked. Maddie looked at me again, tears welling in her eyes now. Real tears, not the weaponized ones I remembered. "Please do not leave me," she whispered. I could not answer. Not yet. The radiology tech Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. "I got her, Ev. Go take a breath." I stepped aside, exhaling slowly as he guided the stretcher into the imaging room. My knees felt shaky, my throat tight. I leaned against the wall, trying to gather myself when my father's voice bellowed again, louder this time. "Where is she? Where is my daughter?" Security responded calm but firm. "Sir, you need to lower your voice or you will be escorted out." My father snarled something unintelligible. Then my mother murmured, "Thomas, stop." But he did not listen. He never listened. And then suddenly his voice was behind me. "Evelyn." I turned slowly, like moving through cold water. And there he was. Older, more worn, less invincible than I remembered. His eyes met mine, wide and stunned. It was as if seeing me in scrubs working calm steady broke something inside him. He took a stumbling step forward. Evelyn, please, do not walk away. Not again. I swallowed hard. My voice came out low. I did not walk away. I was shoved away. His face pulled tight, pain flashing across it. He opened his mouth to speak, but behind him I saw Maddie's stretcher emerging from radiology, Marcus pushing her gently. Her wrist was wrapped, her face pale, her eyes locked on mine, trembling. Evelyn, she whispered again. I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in my life, Maddie was not the golden child. She was a girl who had learned painfully what I learned at 17. When you enable someone long enough, the world eventually hands them the bill, and sometimes that bill arrives in the form of bruises. My father stepped closer. Please, Evelyn, do not abandon us again. The word again hit me like a spark to dry wood. I steadied my breath. I am not abandoning anyone, I said quietly. I am doing my job, nothing more, nothing less. His shoulders sagged. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Maddie reached up with her uninjured hand trembling. I am sorry, she whispered. The apology I had once begged for, the apology I thought would heal me. But now, looking at her, I realized something profound. I no longer needed it. I nodded once. Professional, detached, human, but no longer theirs to break. As I turned to push the stretcher back toward her room, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not closure, something cleaner. The quiet understanding that I had already built the life they could not take from me. And for the first time, I was not the one who needed saving. They were. The financial collapse of the Hart household did not happen in a single dramatic moment like a foreclosure notice nailed to the door or a sheriff's car pulling into the driveway. It unfolded slowly, almost methodically, like a structure weakened by years of poor wiring and ignored cracks, finally giving way under its own weight. I first heard about the mortgage situation from Aunt Jill, my mother's older sister, who showed up at the clinic with chest tightness that turned out to be nothing more than high stress and too much coffee. She sat on the exam table swinging her feet while I checked her blood pressure, and as soon as she realized she had me alone, she sighed deeply and said, "Your folks are in trouble, Evelyn." Somehow she made the sentence sound both accusatory and sympathetic. I kept my expression neutral. What kind of trouble? Money trouble. Big trouble. She lowered her voice. They are 6 months behind on the mortgage. The bank is closing in. My hand stilled for a moment before I resumed wrapping the blood pressure cuff. Aunt Jill kept talking. Your father has been out of work for weeks. His shoulder is not healing right. And your mother is drowning trying to keep up with everything. They should have told you, but your father is too proud. I finished recording her vitals before finally replying. They did not tell me because they only call when they want something. Aunt Jill pressed her lips together. You cannot blame them for asking their child for help. I looked at her steadily. They have 2 children. One of them was protected. The other was sacrificed. She flinched slightly but did not argue. After she left the clinic, I stood at the front desk for a long minute, my fingers tapping the counter. 6 months behind. Not a small number. Not something you could cover with a yard sale or an extra shift. That was collapse territory. That was the kind of financial quicksand families did not climb out of easily. 2 days later, Mrs. Lang called Mildred's house, her voice cracking like a radio catching static. Evelyn, sweetheart, things have gotten worse. I closed my eyes. What happened now? She hesitated. The utility company came by. They put a notice on the door. Your father ripped it down before anyone could read it, but we saw. They are months behind on electricity, too. The street was buzzing, neighbors whispering behind hands, people guessing how a respected fireman's family could fall apart like that. I thanked her and hung up. Mildred, who had been loading dishes into the dishwasher, looked over her shoulder. Sitting with that all by yourself will eat you alive. I leaned against the counter. I am not sitting with it. I am trying to decide if I care. She nodded once. Then you are halfway free already. At the clinic the following week, I heard 2 techs talking near the break room, their voices carrying through the hallway. Did you hear about that fireman from Salem? Shoulder injury suspended, bills piling up. House might go on the market soon. His kid is always showing up in trouble, right? The little one. I tightened my grip on the chart in my hand. I knew they were not being cruel, just gossip. People always gossiped. But something inside me twisted anyway, because that was my family, my past, my ghosts, and all of it was unraveling in front of strangers who had no idea how long that unraveling had been overdue. The next blow came when my mother texted me late one night. The message was a single line. "Please, Evelyn, we are drowning." I stared at the screen for a long minute. My thumb hovered but did not move. If I responded, I would be sucked back in. If I ignored it, the guilt would claw at me. But neither feeling outweighed the truth. Their drowning was not my doing. The following afternoon, while I was taking a patient's vitals, I saw my father through the glass hallway window. He looked older than I had ever seen him, shoulders slumped, face drawn and pale. He approached the front desk, and I overheard him ask the receptionist, "Is Evelyn working today?" My stomach clenched. I stepped out from behind the curtain and faced him. His eyes softened in relief when he saw me. "Evelyn," he said breathlessly, "we need your help. Mom said you would not answer her." The words hit me like cold water. He did not start with apology, not with acknowledgement, not with anything human. Just need. Always need. I kept my arms folded. "What do you want?" He ran a hand through his graying hair, looking around as if afraid someone might overhear. "The bank is threatening foreclosure. We need $12,000 to stop the process." My chest tightened. $12,000. I earned $19 an hour as an ER tech. I lived in a spare room and walked to work. $12,000 was almost everything I had saved in a year of scraping and hustling. Dad took a step closer. "Please, Evelyn, you can help us. You have always been the responsible one. Always been the one who kept this family steady." That sentence sealed something for me. Always been the one who kept this family steady. That was the script I had been handed at 12. At 15. At 17. Carry the emotional weight. Carry the blame. Carry the burden. Pay the bill. Always me. Always. My voice came out level. "I am not giving you $12,000. His eyes widened as if I had slapped him. "Evelyn, please. We will lose the house." I nodded calm. "Then you lose the house." His mouth opened disbelief, twisting his features. "You cannot be serious. That is your home, too." "No, it is not. Not anymore. Not since the night you shoved me into a dresser and told me I was suspended from my own room." His face crumpled slightly at that memory. I pressed on my voice steady. "You built a house where one child was protected and one child was disposable. If that house burns, that is on you, not on me." His voice cracked. "You are heartless." I swallowed hard. "I am alive. There is a difference." I walked past him before he could respond. As I stepped into the hallway, my knees trembled. Not from guilt, from release. The next month, the foreclosure notice became official. They were given 60 days to move out. The house that had once been my cage, my battlefield, my nightmare, was now a condemned shell. Word spread through the neighborhood fast. People whispered. Some expressed sympathy. Some judged. But the truth was simple. This collapse had been built one brick at a time over years of denial, anger, and favoritism. They had ignored the cracks. Now the whole structure was falling, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel responsible for holding it up. The day I made my final decision not to return home did not come with shouting or threats or any dramatic collapse. It arrived quietly, the way an old wound finally closes without fanfare. I was sitting in the staff lounge during a slow hour, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, when my phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit with a message so long it wrapped into 3 lines even in preview. From my mother. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. "Evelyn, please listen. We cannot lose everything. Your father is sick with worry. Maddie cries every night. We need our family back. If you come home, things can be different. Please, just talk to him. Talk to us." There was no apology in the text, not a hint of acknowledgement. Just need. Desperation. Expectation. as if my return would magically rebuild the crumbling walls of a house that was never stable to begin with. I locked the phone without responding. When I looked up, Dr. Norman was leaning against the doorframe, observing me with the quiet perceptiveness he had always had. Trouble at home again, I assume. I nodded. He crossed the room and sat across from me. He did not ask questions. He just waited. Finally, I said, "They want me to come back. Now that everything is falling apart, they swear things will be different." His brows rose slightly. "And do you believe that?" I stared down at my cup. The first 17 years of my life answered that question for me. "No." He nodded, once his blue eyes softening. "Then do not go back." I swallowed hard. It sounded simple when he said it, clean, practical. But inside me, the old wiring sparked and flared. You do not walk away from family. You fix things. You sacrifice. You shrink yourself until everything is peaceful again. Except peace never came. Only exhaustion. Only bruises. Only silence. My hands trembled faintly as I set the coffee down. "I do not think they understand what they did," I said quietly. Norman leaned forward. "They do not have to understand. You do. That is enough." I looked at him, startled by how much weight those words carried, but he was not finished. "If you go back, it will start again. Maybe slower, maybe quieter, but it will start. You will spend your 20s healing from what your teens tore apart. Then you will spend your 30s trying to rebuild what is left of your self-worth. And one day you will wake up and wonder why you never saved your own life when you had the chance." I exhaled shakily. He was right. So painfully right. That evening, when my shift ended, I walked the long way home through the soft glow of streetlights. Spring had begun to settle over Salem, the air warm and sweet, fireflies flickering above the grass. I tried to imagine myself back in that house, sitting at the dinner table across from my father, pretending I was not afraid every time he raised his voice, pretending my mother did not watch silently while things broke around her, pretending Matey had not smiled when I cried, pretending that forgiveness could reconstruct something that had never been whole. When I reached Mildred's front door, she was already there waiting like she always did when she sensed something heavy following me home. I sank onto the couch beside her. She placed a folded blanket over my legs without a word, letting me speak first. "They want me to come home," I said softly. Mildred nodded. "And what do you want?" The question hit deeper than I expected. What did I want? No one had asked me that before. Not in 17 years. Not even once. I laced my fingers together and stared at them. "I want to keep breathing without feeling like it hurts." "That is a good start," she said gently. "I want to live without waiting for someone to explode." She nodded. "I want to be more than the space I once took up in that house. I want a future that is mine." My voice cracked on the last word. "Mine." Mildred took my hand. "Then you already know the answer." Later that night, as I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily, I thought about every moment that had led me here, my father's rage-filled demand that I apologize for something I did not do, my mother's refusal to intervene, Matey's smirk as she played victim again and again, the bruise spreading across my ribs the night I ended up in the ER, the doctor asking if I felt safe. The moment I whispered, "All right," in that cold, white room, knowing I was done, letting them decide who I was. I sat up, swung my legs over the side of the bed, and picked up my phone. Another message from my mother had come in. "We can start over. Please, just give us a chance." For a split second, guilt tried to rise like smoke in my chest. But then I remembered the quiet voice of Dr. Norman. "If you go back, it will start again." I typed a single response. "I will not be coming home." Then I turned off my phone and set it face down on the nightstand. The next morning, when I arrived at the clinic, Deb handed me a freshly printed schedule. "Congratulations," she said, smiling. "You have been bumped to ER Tech full-time. Norman thinks you are ready." My breath caught. "You are serious. You earned it." She gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "We are proud of you, kid." For the first time in a long time, I felt something warm bloom in my chest. Pride. Not the conditional kind I used to chase. Real pride. Mine. That afternoon, while I was stocking the supply shelves, my father showed up at the clinic. He looked even more exhausted than before. His voice was quiet but frayed. "Evelyn, we cannot do this without you. Please come home." I held a box of saline flushes against my chest, grounding myself. "No," I said simply. "I am not coming back." He blinked, stunned. His voice broke. "You are choosing them over us." I shook my head. "I am choosing me." He stared at me for a long moment, and for the first time I watched a realization cross his face. The kind that changes people, or breaks them. He nodded slowly, defeated. Then he walked away without another word. As I watched him leave, I felt no guilt, no fear, no urge to chase him. Just an overwhelming wave of clarity. Walking away was not betrayal. It was survival. And for the first time in my life, I had chosen my own life over their chaos. It was the decision that would change everything. The foreclosure itself became official on a Thursday afternoon in late June, a day so humid the air felt like warm syrup clinging to the skin. I was midway through organizing medication trays when Mildred poked her head into the room, her face touched with that careful softness she reserved for the hardest truths. "Honey, you might want to sit down." Something in her tone told me immediately this was about them. I shook my head. "I am fine. Just tell me." She hesitated only a moment before saying, "The Hart House has been posted. The county website updated this morning. It will be vacant in 30 days. For a moment, the room went silent except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights. Posted. Vacant. Words that should have felt like closure instead sat in my stomach like a stone. I swallowed and went back to organizing the trays, even though my hands had begun to shake. Mildred stepped closer. "You do not have to pretend this does not hurt." I exhaled slowly. It does not hurt the way it used to. It feels distant, like hearing news about someone I used to know. She nodded understanding without judgment. That evening, the news spread through Salem faster than rainfall. Small towns were like that. Word traveled through whispers exchanged at the checkout line, murmurs over gas pumps, quiet conversations on porches. The Harts lost their house. It was bound to happen. Poor things. Did you hear about Maddie? About Thomas? About Caroline? Some spoke with sympathy, some with a hint of curiosity. Others with the barely concealed satisfaction of people watching a pedestal crumble. I went for a walk after sunset, letting the night air cool my skin. Fireflies blinked along the edge of the quiet streets. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I walked past the bakery where my mother once worked early mornings, the parking lot where Dad had taught me to ride a bike, the old bridge where Maddie used to take pictures for social media. Everything looked the same, yet none of it belonged to me anymore. 3 days later, as I was finishing a shift in the ER, I stepped into the hallway and froze. My mother was sitting on one of the plastic chairs near the nurse's station, her hands twisted in her lap, her shoulders trembling. She looked smaller somehow, collapsed inward like a house slowly sinking on its foundation. When she saw me, her breath hitched. "Evelyn." She stood abruptly and rushed toward me, tears already streaming down her face. I held up a hand, keeping distance not out of anger, but out of necessity. She stopped a few feet away, her chest rising and falling with frantic breaths. "We are being evicted. 30 days. I nodded slowly. "I know." Her gaze widened, incredulous. "You knew." "Aunt Jill told me." Mom pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Your father does not sleep. Matey barely gets out of bed. We do not have anywhere to go." I kept my voice calm. "You can rent." She shook her head violently. "Rent where?" "Rent. Everything is too expensive. The waiting lists are long. We will have to stay in a motel or a shelter." The word shelter broke something in her voice. She stepped closer. "Evelyn, please. Please help us." Her desperation radiated from her like heat. I took a slow breath. "I am sorry for what you are going through. Truly, but I am not your solution." Her expression twisted. "You are our daughter. You cannot abandon us." I met her gaze steadily. "You abandoned me long before I walked out that door." Her hand dropped to her side, the words hitting with the weight of years she never acknowledged. She whispered, "We made mistakes. We know that now. We are losing everything. Please, come home. Help us. Make us a family again." A hollow ache opened in my chest, not because I wanted to return, but because I finally understood something I had not seen clearly before. They did not want me back because they loved me. They wanted me back because the person they had always relied on to hold the family together was gone. And now the cracks they ignored for years had widened into canyons. I said quietly, "I cannot rebuild a house that was never safe for me." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she shook her head. "You do not understand. Your father is ashamed. He cannot get work. Maddie is falling apart. No one is the same since you left." I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them. "That is not because I left. It is because you built everything on a lie." The silence between us stretched thin. Finally, she whispered, "You are choosing strangers over us." I sighed softly. I am choosing myself, for the first time. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob, the sound soft and broken. I wanted to comfort her. My body knew that script. Move closer, apologize, promise to help, carry the weight. But I stayed where I was, not out of cruelty, out of healing. Before she left, she said, "Your father will come tomorrow. He refuses to give up." That night, I barely slept. Not because of fear, but because I finally saw the truth leaving was not an act of rebellion. It was an act of survival that forced the cracks in their world to finally show themselves. The following afternoon, as I walked to the clinic's back entrance to clock in, I saw a familiar figure standing near the curb. My father. Shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. His clothes looked worn, and for the first time in my life, he looked small. Not powerful, not towering, not invincible. Just a man who had run out of walls to punch. He approached slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal. "Evelyn." His voice cracked. "We lost the house." I nodded. "I heard." He swallowed hard. "I do not have the right to ask, but I am asking anyway. Please, come home. Help us get back on our feet. We can fix this. We can fix us." The wind rustled the trees nearby. Cars passed in the distance. Life continued around us, and in that moment, standing under the pale afternoon sky, I realized something that ended the last thread tying me to that house. There was no us left to fix, only ruins. And they were not mine. I shook my head slowly. I am not coming home. His breath shuddered out of him, and he squeezed his eyes shut. The silence that followed was not angry, not explosive. It was the silence of surrender. He whispered, "I do not know how to live with what I have done." I replied gently, "Then start by not doing it again." He opened his eyes, and something inside him broke, not violently this time, but quietly, like a final weary collapse. He nodded once, then he turned and walked away. No shouting, no threats, no order to apologize. Just a man leaving behind the rubble of his own making, and for the first time, I felt free. The summer after the foreclosure felt like stepping into a life I had once believed belonged only to other people. People who were allowed to breathe without fear. People who were allowed to imagine futures without flinching. People who woke up without bracing for someone else's anger. For the first time, that person was me. I moved out of Mildred's house 3 weeks after turning 19, carrying 2 duffel bags, a thrift store lamp, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, I deserved something better than survival. The apartment I rented in Charlotte was tiny, barely big enough for a bed, a desk, and a makeshift kitchen table made from milk crates, but it was mine. Every inch of it. Mine to decorate, mine to clean, mine to return to at the end of a shift, without worrying whether the front door would slam or whether raised voices would ricochet through the walls. I taped cheap string lights across the ceiling, unpacked my CNA textbooks, and sat on the floor with a bowl of instant noodles, listening to the hum of my own refrigerator. It was the quietest meal I had ever eaten, and somehow the most beautiful. At the clinic, Dr. Norman continued to watch my progress the way gardeners watch a sapling grow quietly, patiently, knowing it would flourish long before I realized it. One evening after my shift, he approached me as I was wiping down an exam table. I looked up surprised at the softness in his eyes. "You are ready," he said simply. "Ready for what?" He smiled. "The EMT program. There is an opening in Asheville, full scholarship. You have earned it." I blinked, the words slow to settle. Scholarship. EMT program. Asheville. A future not built from scraps but from promise. I swallowed. "Why me?" Norman shrugged lightly. "Because you are good. Because you work harder than anyone I have ever met. Because you know what fear looks like, and that makes you better at saving people." My throat tightened. I thought about 17-year-old me lying in an ER bed, bruised, terrified, whispering, "All right," to the bright ceiling lights because I had finally decided to save myself. Maybe this was the echo of that moment. Maybe this was the reward I had never expected. I accepted the scholarship, moved to Asheville, and settled into a small studio with creaky floors and a fire escape that overlooked a bakery. The smell of warm bread drifted into my window each morning, and for the first time, mornings did not feel like something I had to endure. They felt like beginnings. Real beginnings. EMT training was grueling, relentless, and exhilarating. I learned to read EKGs, stabilize fractures, control bleeding, manage airway emergencies, deliver babies in the back of ambulances. I carried 12-hour shifts on my back, studied until sunrise, and realized that the chaos of emergency medicine made sense to me in ways home never had. Trauma care feels strangely like truth. There is no pretending, no manipulating, no rewriting history. Blood is blood. Pain is pain. A patient either breathes or they do not. There is no room for denial. The clarity soothed me. 3 months into the program, I met Lucas during a night shift rotation at Asheville General. He was an X-ray tech with kind eyes, rough hands, and a laugh that felt like sunlight after years of storms. The first time we talked was in the break room while he was cleaning a scanner plate and I was inhaling a stale granola bar. "You are the new EMT trainee, right?" I nodded, wiping crumbs from my fingers. He grinned. "You look like you have not slept since January." I huffed a laugh. "I probably have not." He leaned back against the counter, studying me, but not in the way people sometimes study trauma survivors, searching for cracks or scars. He looked at me like someone meeting an equal, someone worth seeing. I found myself telling him things I had not said aloud in years. Not the worst parts. Just glimpses. My family is a mess. I am not going back. He nodded gently. Some places are worth leaving. He did not press for details. He did not pity me. He simply accepted my truth. We started getting coffee after shifts, then taking walks on the hospital grounds, then studying together in the quiet corners of the radiology wing. It was slow, patient healing, the kind of connection that grows roots before it grows branches. Meanwhile, I bought my first car with money I had saved from back-to-back shifts, a used Honda CR-V with too many miles and a sunroof that stuck halfway open, but it started every morning and the radio worked perfectly. Driving it down the Blue Ridge Parkway on my days off made me feel like I was finally steering my own life instead of being pushed through it. Back in Salem, the stories reached me through whispers. The Harts were living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment near a noisy highway overpass. My father picked up part-time work at a warehouse, but his shoulder injury kept him from lifting anything substantial. My mother cleaned offices at night, exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin. Mady, still fragile from her assault and still convinced the world owed her something, had dropped out of school entirely. None of them reached out. Not for apologies, not for conversations, not for reconciliation. And I did not reach back. Not out of hatred, out of peace. One afternoon while I was restocking IV kits in the ER, Lucas walked up behind me and nudged my shoulder gently. "You seem lighter," he said softly, like someone who finally stopped carrying something heavy. I looked up at him, the fluorescent lights reflecting in his dark eyes. "I guess I finally learned how to put it down." He smiled, then leaned close enough that I could hear his heartbeat. "Then keep going. You are becoming who you were meant to be." I realized then that he was right. My life no longer revolved around surviving the Hart household. I was building something, a career, a home, a future, a self. My phone still buzzed sometimes with unknown numbers, but I no longer wondered if they were from Salem. I no longer feared what waited there. I no longer checked shadows for ghosts. Instead, I woke each morning to a world I had chosen, a world I wanted, a world where the girl who once whispered "all right" to an ER ceiling was now the woman saving strangers from the very storms she had survived. Evelyn Hart was rising. Finally. Fully. Completely. It happened on a gray afternoon in early October, the kind of day when the clouds hang low enough to touch the tops of buildings and everything feels suspended in a heavy quiet. I had just finished transferring a trauma patient to the surgical team when the charge nurse stepped into the hallway and called my name with a strange mix of hesitation and urgency. "Evelyn, someone is here asking for you." My mind flicked through possibilities. Lucas, a patient's family member, maybe a new EMT recruit, but the look in her eyes told me it was none of those. She stepped aside, and there he was, my father. Standing near the sliding glass doors of the ER, shoulders hunched, hands wringing a frayed baseball cap he must have been holding for hours. He looked older, not in the natural way time ages a person, but in the way regret erodes someone from the inside. His hair had thinned, his posture had collapsed, his eyes were ringed with exhaustion, a haunted kind of emptiness that made him look like a man who no longer recognized his own reflection. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the hum of the hospital machines filling the space between us like white noise. He spoke first, his voice thin. "Evelyn." I wiped my hands on my scrub pants, grounding myself. "Dad!" He swallowed Adam's apple bobbing. There was a tremor in his voice I had never heard before. Not even in the worst moments of my childhood, not even in the ER the night he sent me there. He stepped closer, but not too close. "I am not here to cause trouble. I will leave if you tell me to." I held my breath, waiting. He looked around at the ER lobby, taking in the nurses, the patients, the smell of antiseptic, the steady beep of monitors. His voice cracked. "This is where you belong, isn't it?" My throat tightened. "It is." He nodded as if that confirmed something he had been fighting against for years. His eyes moved to my face, searching, aching. I have replayed that night every day, every hour, every minute. The rage, the noise, the way you said, "all right," like you had nothing left to give. I flinched at the memory, not because it hurt, but because for once he seemed to understand the weight of it. I did that. I did all of that. I braced myself for excuses for the familiar script of justification he had always hidden behind. But they never came. Instead, his shoulders sagged even more. I was a coward. I was a bully. I was a man who mistook respect for fear and thought I had the right to control everything around me, including you. He lowered his gaze, voice trembling. "I hurt the one person who never deserved it, and I cannot fix that. I cannot undo what I did." I waited, letting the silence stretch until it became honest. When he looked up again, tears blurred his eyes. "Evelyn, I am not asking you to come home. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking for money or help or anything. I just needed to tell you. I am sorry, really sorry, and I do not know how to live with what I have done to you." His words were not dramatic or rehearsed. They were raw, stripped of pride, stripped of the armor he had worn his whole life, and somehow that made them heavier. I looked at him, not the father I once feared, but the man he had become. A man bent by consequences he built with his own hands. I spoke softly. "Do you remember what you told me the night you suspended me from home?" He winced. "I remember. You said I could not come back unless I apologized to Maddie. You said your house was no place for disrespect." He nodded slowly. "I was wrong," I continued. "You were right about one thing, though. Your house was no place for me. But you were wrong about why." His brows drew together. "It was not me that made it unsafe. It was you." The words landed between us like a final truth neither of us could outrun. His breath caught. I know that now. And I would give anything to go back and undo it. But I cannot. All I can do is tell you that you deserved better than me." My chest tightened with something complicated, something that wasn't forgiveness but wasn't hatred either. A space in between. A space shaped like adulthood, like healing. I stepped closer, meeting his gaze with steadiness I never had as a child. "I forgive you." His knees nearly buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair for support, face twisting, as if the words were both salvation and punishment. I continued quietly, "But forgiveness is not the same as returning. I am not going back. Ever." He nodded, tears falling freely now. No attempt to hide them. "I understand, and I will not ask again." I placed a hand on the chair beside me, grounding myself as I added, "You need to fix yourself, Dad. Not for me. For you. For whatever life you have left. For whoever you choose to be now." His voice broke completely. "I do not know how." I held his gaze. "Start by not becoming the man you were." He let out a shaky breath, something inside him unclenching for the first time in decades. Then he stepped back, leaving a careful distance between us. He clicked his cap back into his hands and whispered, "I am proud of you, you know. The woman you became. The woman I never deserved." A lump formed in my throat, unexpected and heavy. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and turned toward the exit. He walked slowly, like someone leaving a graveyard, like someone burying a version of himself for good. I watched him disappear through the sliding glass doors, the gray sky swallowing his figure until he became a silhouette, then a shadow, then nothing at all. I felt no triumph, no vengeance, no righteous satisfaction. Only clarity. He was not coming back, and neither was I. I was 27 when the final pieces of my life finally clicked into place, though they did not arrive with fanfare or celebration or any of the dramatic crescendos people imagine healing will bring. They came quietly, like soft rain tapping a window, easy to miss if you were not paying attention. I had been living in Asheville for 3 years by then, working full-time as an EMT and picking up occasional shifts in the ER whenever they needed an extra hand. My days were long and messy and unpredictable, but they were mine. My nights were calm, spent cooking simple meals in my little kitchen, watching old movies with Lucas, or sitting on the fire escape listening to the steady hum of the city below. It was a life built not from chaos or fear or survival, but from choice. My choice. On a chilly morning in early March, I woke before sunrise to the sound of birds outside my window, the first signs of spring breaking through the last stretch of winter. I wrapped myself in a sweatshirt, brewed coffee, and stepped onto the fire escape. From there, I could see the distant line of the Blue Ridge Mountains, soft and blue in the dawn. The air was crisp, carrying that faint scent of wet earth and blooming trees. I took a slow breath and felt something inside me settle like a door finally clicking shut. Later that morning, as I drove my used Honda down the winding roads toward the station, I passed a small house for sale. Its porch framed with white railings and a row of flower boxes already planted with early tulips. Something about it stayed with me all day, tugging at a part of me that had finally grown solid enough to imagine roots. A week later, almost without meaning to, I found myself scheduling a viewing. The house was small but bright with creaking hardwood floors and a sunlit kitchen that reminded me of the bakery's warm scent drifting into my apartment window when I first moved here. The backyard had a fence and a maple tree perfect for a hammock. I walked through each room, slowly tracing the walls with my fingertips, imagining a life lived without fear, without apology, without the ghost of who I used to be looming behind every decision. When the realtor asked if I wanted to put in an offer, the answer rose from somewhere deep inside me. Yes. I went home that night and told Lucas, who broke into a wide grin and wrapped his arms around me. "You deserve this," he whispered. And for the first time in my life, I believed him. The loan process took time, but 2 months later, I held the keys to my own home, my own space, my own beginning. I painted the living room a soft gray. I hung string lights along the back porch. I bought a second-hand couch that sagged a little in the middle, but made up for it in comfort. I planted herbs in the kitchen windowsill and watched them sprout tiny green reminders of growth. Life became a series of quiet victories. I published a small article in a regional medical journal about emotional burnout in EMTs. I took a wilderness first responder course. I started running on the weekends with Lucas, who always slowed his pace without comment when I got tired. I made friends, real ones, people who saw me as Evelyn, not as the invisible child or the scapegoat or the girl who once whispered, "All right," in an ER bed, because she had finally reached the end of what she could survive. The echoes of my past softened, losing their sharpness with each year that passed. But they never disappeared entirely. Trauma is like that. It fades, but it keeps a small room in the back of your mind, a place you seldom visit but never forget. One afternoon in late summer, while I was restocking the ambulance with my partner, I received an unexpected message. Not a call, not a plea, just a text from an unknown number. It read, "We are okay. Hope you are too." No names, no guilt, no demands, no blaming. Just a sentence floating like a leaf on calm water. I stared at it for a long time before locking my phone and slipping it back into my pocket. I did not reply. Not because I was angry, because there was nothing left to say. Some stories do not need a sequel. Some chapters close without confrontation or confession or final words. Sometimes the quiet ending is the truest one. Months later, I stood in my backyard on a cool autumn evening, the leaves crunching under my boots, as the last light of day settled behind the hills. The sky was a deep blue fading toward night. Lucas called from the kitchen asking whether I wanted soup or grilled cheese. I laughed at the sound surprising me with how light it was and told him either one was fine. I leaned against the porch railing sipping tea, breathing in the crisp scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke drifting from a neighbor's chimney. It hit me then with a clarity so sharp it felt like light breaking through cloud. The girl who once lay bruised in an ER bed finally became the woman she needed. Not because someone saved her, not because her family changed, but because she learned to walk away. She learned that leaving was not failure, it was choosing life. And the justice that followed was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, unfolding slowly over the years. The heart house lost, the facade shattered, the dynamics exposed, the consequences arriving one by one, not through revenge, but through the natural collapse of a system built on lies, favoritism, and violence. I whispered into the evening air, the memory drifting back to me with unexpected gentleness. All right. The words no longer belonged to a broken girl in a hospital bed. They belonged to the woman I had become. A woman with a home, a future, a life she built brick by brick, rescue by rescue, choice by choice. The echo of "they would" had long since faded because it had already come true in ways I did not have to witness. They would face consequences. They would unravel. They would confront the truth of what they had done, and I did not need to see any of it. Quiet justice had already done its work. I stepped inside as Lucas called my name again, closing the door gently behind me. This was my life now, my peace, my ending, and my beginning. Before you scroll away, I want you to sit with something for just a moment, because if you made it all the way to the end of my story, there is a reason. Maybe you did not grow up in a house like mine. Maybe you did. Maybe you spent years being the strong one, the quiet one, the one who held the storm back with both hands until your arms shook from the weight of it. Or maybe you were the child who learned to apologize just to keep peace. Maybe you learned to shrink yourself so someone else could shine. Maybe you learned to walk on eggshells so no one would explode. If any of that sounds familiar, then you already understand why I told my story and why I whispered "all right" in that ER bed so many years ago. It was not surrender. It was a promise that I would not live my life in fear, a promise that I would not bend myself into someone else's shape just to survive another day, a promise that I would one day walk away. And here is the truth. People often avoid walking away is not betrayal. It is not disrespect. It is not giving up. It is choosing yourself after years of choosing everyone else. It is choosing peace over chaos. It is choosing healing over harm. It is choosing to build a life where you wake up without dread sitting on your chest like a stone. For so many of you watching, especially those in your 50s, 60s, and beyond, you know exactly what that stone feels like. You know the sound of slammed doors. You know the sting of unfair blame. You know what it is to lose years trying to earn love from people who were never willing to give it freely. But you also know something else. You know the quiet courage it takes to say enough. You know the strength it requires to walk out of a house that never felt like home. You know the power of finding yourself again after decades of being told who you were allowed to be. And if you have not left yet, if you are still living in the shadow of someone else's anger, someone else's expectations, someone else's control, I want you to hear me clearly. You deserve peace. You deserve respect. You deserve safety. You deserve to breathe without fear. You deserve a life that feels like your own. It does not matter how old you are. It is never too late to begin again. Look at me. I rebuilt my life from the ground up. I found work that mattered. I found a place to live where the walls did not echo with shouting. I found love that felt steady and kind. I found mornings that felt soft enough to believe in, and you can find those things too. Maybe your story will look different than mine. Maybe your ending will not involve a new house or a new town or a new job. Maybe your beginning starts with something as small as choosing silence over engaging in one more argument, or choosing a walk outside instead of sitting in a room that drains you. Maybe your first step will be tiny. That is still a step. Here is the truth. Most people forget you do not have to stay where you are just because you have been there a long time. Pain does not become love just because you learned to survive it. Family does not become safe just because you keep forgiving them. And a house does not become a home just because you were raised inside it. You have the right to leave. You have the right to heal. You have the right to build something better. And if watching my story made something in your chest ache or tighten or whisper that you have been living small for too long, then maybe this is your moment. Not to run, not to fight, but to choose you. And if you have already walked away, if you have already rebuilt your life from ashes, then I hope my story reminded you of how far you have come. Because surviving is one thing, but rising is another. And you rose. So before you leave this video, tell me in the comments, what was the moment when you finally said enough? Or if you are still waiting for that moment, what is the very first step you want to take toward peace? Your story matters, your voice matters, and you deserve a life that feels like yours.